I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
Welcome back to the Libertopian Podcast. I'm again your host, Chad Mitchell. Thank you for joining me on this week's edition. It is June 12, 2012. We've got plenty of news to cover today, and the Rand Paul situation is still heating up. There's still people that are really mad at Rand, and they're throwing stones at him right and left. I actually listened to Rand this morning on the Peter Schiff show, and I thought it was an excellent interview. He basically echoed everything that I said last week on the podcast as far as the reason why he endorsed Mitt Romney. It's mainly for political reasons, as we assumed that it would be. But while you guys are busy condemning Rand, he's out there explaining why he did it. And if you listen to him, he actually throws the ball back in the court of those who are upset with him, because he says, basically in the 2010 Senate election, my opponents were condemning me or attacking me for the fact that my father had not endorsed John McCain for the Republican nomination for president. He also didn't support John McCain against Obama. So the point is that was an attack point against Rand. So Rand didn't want to make the same mistake again by not endorsing the Republican nominee for president. And I'm also sure for doing it so early, I'm sure he got some concessions from Romney as far as maybe possibly helping to get the audit the Fed bill passed through Congress and get that on Romney's desk if he becomes president and get that signed into law, which would be a huge victory for the Liberty Movement as far as getting the Fed exposed. And once the Fed is exposed, it's only a short amount of time before the American people will demand an end to the Fed. And the reality is, I didn't have any delusions about what Rand was trying to do. If you look back when Rand first was running for the Senate, he basically came out on many interviews and he was more politically strategic as far as what he had to say. The rhetoric that he used was not the same rhetoric that his father would use. It was more generic Republican talking points. And at the time, I thought to myself, I don't know if Rand is really just like Ron or not. And the more I got to know him and look into his policies, I figured out exactly what Rand was trying to do. And what Rand was trying to do was to use the political apparatus and be strategic about it at the same time, but to use the Republican apparatus to further the cause of liberty. He believed in ending the Fed. He believed in almost everything that his father believed in, but he had probably seen all those years, the 30 years that Ron Paul has been in the Congress, him constantly no, not wanting to give an inch when it came to his principles. And not that Rand wants to give an inch when it comes to his principles either, but he is seeing how just doing the small political strategic things that he can do, such as giving a truly meaningless endorsement to Romney, can help his political career and put him in a position to further the cause of liberty. And I never saw Rand as some philosophical leader for the Liberty Movement. And I think a lot of people saw the Pauls together, both Rand and Ron, as that. That was a mistake. And by doing so, you set yourself up for basically the feeling that you have right now, that you've been stabbed in the back because Rand endorsed Romney. But Rand was never someone who built himself up to be an ideologically pure libertarian or constitutionalist, for that matter. I mean, he said he was a conservative, constitutionalist conservative, but the reality was he has played politics since he's been in the Senate. You shouldn't have expected this to be any different with Rand Paul. I mean, I saw it coming a mile away, and everyone else should have as well. If you didn't see it coming, I'm sorry. You don't have Rand or Ron Paul to blame on this. You have yourself to blame, because you wanted Rand to be so much like Ron that you didn't acknowledge the facts. You didn't look at how Rand had actually presented himself in the past. And the fact of the matter is, how Rand presented himself was someone who believed in liberty, but was content to use Republican talking points and that apparatus to try to further liberty. He wasn't necessarily going to vote for things that he disagreed with to further it, but at the same time he was going to use that political rhetoric to try to get people on our side. And I think he's been rather successful in doing that. There's been a few cases where he's said some things that I've disagreed with, but for the most part, he has been someone in the Senate that we've been able to depend on to try to make government smaller and to try to further the cause of liberty. So I thank Rand Paul for that. I'm not going to throw stones. I'm not perfect. He is not perfect. The reality is, we all know why he endorsed Romney, and I'm not saying that you have to endorse Romney. I'm not going to endorse Romney. I'm not going to vote for Romney. But the reality is, Rand did something very small that could really help the liberty movement in the political arena, per se. So, moving on, Rand Paul did announce a new act today that he's pushing in the Senate. It is an anti-drone act. The name of the act is Preserving Freedom from Unwarranted Surveillance Act of 2012. Just one more instance where Rand is stepping up and trying his darndest to push liberty and to restrain the federal government in the Senate, while everyone else in the Ron Paul movement is busy condemning Rand and calling him a war hawk and selling him down the river, or saying that he sold us down the river, I should say. He's out there still fighting for liberty. So the reality is, I'm not going to throw stones at Rand over this. I would like to play a video clip real quick, though, that actually has Rand on CNN pitching the bill, per se, to CNN. There was actually a drone that crashed today. I'm not sure where it crashed at. The video will most likely explain that, but let's have a listen here.
The smoldering wreckage is still there, lying in a marsh in Salisbury, Maryland. It's what's left of a military drone. No injuries, no property damage, but $176 million loss for the Air Force. The Air Force is still investigating why this thing crashed. The drone is used for military purposes, but smaller drones are being used by law enforcement agencies across the country. Police say these small drones can fly low and undetected and help them fight crime. The American Civil Liberties Union says it's a violation of personal rights. Republican Senator Rand Paul does too. He's here now. Welcome, Senator.
Good to be with you.
Tell us about your anti-drone bill. I actually have it right here, and I'm amazed. It's 3 pages long.
Well, you know, I got the idea from Representative Austin Scott, so I have to give him some credit, from Georgia. He told me about the bill recently, and so we picked it up and are introducing it as a Senate version. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Fourth Amendment. Not only do I like the Second Amendment, I like the Fourth Amendment. I think you should have to have a warrant to invade people's privacy and to spy on them. And so I think it's very important. And this just basically restates the Constitution, but sometimes you have to restate the Constitution because many up here seem to ignore it. And Representative Scott, when he told me about the bill, he said, look, when I'm out hunting on my property, I don't want them spying on me. And I'm not a hunter, but when I'm separating out my recyclables, I don't want them having a drone to make sure I'm putting my newspaper in the proper bin.
Well, we've already got drone launch sites in more than 20 states. Police are pretty excited about this new crime-fighting tool. So would your bill make these launch sites go away?
What it would do is there's a balancing act. I mean, police do have power, and I want police to catch rapists and murderers, but they ask a judge, and we separate the police from the people who finally make the decision on someone coming in your house. So even if a rapist is loose in D.C. tonight, the police will call a judge in the middle of the night, wake him or her up and say, we think there's a rapist in the neighborhood, can we go in X address? And so those are things that are very, very important to protecting innocent individuals. And a drone is a very, very powerful way of snooping on behavior. And I don't want them monitoring every bit of my behavior. And I'm not joking about the recyclables. I mean, we've had different states and cities trying to punish people criminally for not separating out the recyclables. We don't want a nanny state that watches every minute of our day. It's not that there'll be no drones, it's that drones will only be used when a judge says that it's proper.
What about in this instance? One Texas sheriff told reporters his agency is considering arming his drones with rubber bullets and tear gas. Let's say there's a large crowd gathering, you need some crowd control. This type of drone might be able to diminish any problems on the ground. Would that be allowed under your bill?
Anything that would require a warrant, it would have to have a warrant. And I'm concerned about, obviously, about arming drones, but I don't want to say that I'm arguing against technology. For example, if there's a bomb in a car, I'm very happy that we have automated robots that can go up to the car and investigate the bomb, and we don't have to risk a human. Same with drones. If they could save lives, that'd be one thing. Arming drones obviously sends up pictures of the military, and I don't think really domestically armed drones are a good idea. What I would say is that drones could be used if you have a proper warrant, but that means you go through a judge. A judge has to say there's probable cause of a crime, but I don't want drones roaming across, crisscrossing our cities and our country, snooping on Americans. And that's the surveillance state that I'm very concerned about, and that's what our bill would stop.
This military drone that crashed in Salisbury, Maryland, the ACLU is also concerned that these domestic drones may crash randomly in some neighborhood and hurt people. Is that a concern you have too?
I think that could be a danger. I don't know the safety profile of, how good they are, but they do crash occasionally. So this one crashed, and we also lost the one in Iran. So I think there is some danger, but I'm not against technology per se. What I am for are the constitutional processes that protect our civil liberty. So, it's not like I'm against the police using cars or against them using airplanes or helicopters or robots, but I am for personal privacy, for saying that no policeman will ever do this without asking a judge for permission. That was the recent case where the police were tagging GPS tags on your car without a warrant. The Supreme Court was very clear on this, struck it down 9-0. So I feel comfortable that conservatives and liberals on the Supreme Court are concerned about privacy and technology's ability to invade our privacy. So I am very, very concerned about this, and I think this is a very serious bill, and we're going to push forward, and I'm going to talk to Senator Reid and Senator McConnell about allowing a vote on it.
Do you have the same types of concerns about military drones being used in other countries, or does your bill just specifically deal with drones flying over the United States?
This would only be domestic.
Do you have concerns about the use of military drones in other countries?
I am concerned about one person deciding the life or death of not only foreigners but U.S. citizens around the world, and the chance that one person could make a mistake, is the possibility. So having the president decide who he's going to kill concerns me. I would rather it go through a court, and there are actually secret courts. The FISA court investigates intelligence information, and most of these decisions aren't made like this. They make the decision over weeks and months. They target people and go after them. I see no reason why there couldn't be some sort of court proceeding, even a secret court proceeding, to allow some protection. I mean, even in the United States, where we have the best due process probably in the world, we have probably executed people wrongfully for the death penalty. They've found out through DNA testing many people on death row are there inaccurately, and even Republicans have pulled back their beliefs, some on death penalty. So I think when we decide to kill someone, that's obviously the ultimate punishment. We need to be very, very certain that what we're doing is not in error.
Senator Paul, thanks so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's the new
And as you see there, I think Rand did an excellent job in explaining why we need to be very wary of the drone situation and how that can be used to not only take liberties in America, but take your right to privacy away, which is a liberty, obviously. So, yeah, take your liberties away, and not only that, it's an issue with posse comitatus as well, because you've got a situation where they can arm those drones, and that would basically be a replacement for having armed aircraft, armed jet pilots flying around America, blowing things up. So you have to be extremely careful with this drone situation. And I think Rand is really doing a good job here of making sure that program has the proper restraints and that it does not get out of hand. Moving on here, we've got one more article that I'd like to talk about today. There's a situation with Russia sending Syria attack helicopters, and the U.S. is very concerned about this, obviously, because the Russian government is supporting Assad while the U.S. government is supporting the protesters in Syria. And this is my issue. The only reason why the U.S. is supporting the protesters in Syria is because they're trying to destabilize the Middle East. They're trying to get a situation in, not necessarily the U.S. government, but Western governments in general, because they're controlled by central banks, are trying to get a foothold in a lot of countries where they do not have a foothold. Syria is one of these countries, and so they are making an attempt to essentially overthrow Syria, not with the CIA, but with, even though the CIA could be involved, more or less are trying to incite protest and revolutions from the ground up again, and trying to get a foothold in these countries. And my biggest issue is the fact that the people that we're supporting here are radical Muslims. They're institutions like the Muslim Brotherhood, who not only hate the U.S. some for the right reasons, but they also are anti-freedom, and that's why I don't like them. I don't like people in groups who are anti-freedom, and they don't want a secular government. They want a theocracy to oppress the people, and they want a theocracy so they can kill Jews and Christians. And this is something that we should be opposing as Americans. I'm not saying that the U.S. government should be directly involved, but the American people should oppose it. They should oppose some of these violent overthrows that are not seeking freedom and justice and liberty as it pertains to common law and natural law. And frankly, Sharia is just not in accordance with that. And a lot of these groups, we saw it in Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood has basically taken over the Egyptian government, and this is a situation that we should be trying to avoid. But instead, we've got a situation where now we're butting heads with Russia, because Russia actually has strategic relationships with Syria through trade, and it's really in Russia's own interest. It's in their strategic interest to continue that relationship with Assad and with Syria. The U.S., on the other hand, really has no stake with Syria, other than the fact that they're trying to brand it as they're trying to be humanitarian. The reality is they're not trying to be humanitarian. They're trying to get a foothold in that country, either for corporate interest stake or for central bank interest, because, the reality is, the IMF, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve, they want to get a foothold in as many countries as they possibly can, and Syria is no different. So that's the only strategic interest that I can see at stake here for the U.S., although it's really not the U.S., it's the globalists that control the U.S. government, and it's frankly sad. I think we should all pray for America and continue to hope that liberty will gain hold in this country, and we can possibly hold these tyrants accountable. But other than that, that's going to be the last article that I covered today. I would like to go over real quick some books that I'm currently on. I haven't finished a book yet. I have this problem where I continue to read just different books at one time because I'm sporadic. I don't know if I have ADD or what it is. But I'm currently rereading Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World. I would recommend that for anyone looking for a good dystopic book. I'm also reading Peter Schiff's new book, The Real Crash. I would recommend that for anyone who wants more of an introductory look at why we're in the position that we're in today. And he doesn't use big fancy words like many economists will use, so it puts it really in layman's terms for you if you're not as familiar with the terminology, and you can really follow along there, and he can really break down for you where the U.S. currently is, where we've been, and what we need to do going forward if we want to change trajectory. So that is all I have for this week's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's again June 12, 2012, and I will see you guys next week. Take care.